The drops hit the floor so loudly it felt like someone had turned on a shower right above my head. I jumped out of bed and landed barefoot in a freezing puddle. The wooden floor squished under my feet, water spreading in every direction. I flicked on the light, and my heart sank. Thin streams were running down the bedroom ceiling, dripping straight onto my pillow and blanket. I rushed into the kitchen, grabbed a pot, and shoved it under the heaviest stream. Within seconds, water hammered against the metal bottom, splashing everywhere. I set down a bowl, then another one. But it didn't matter, new leaks opened up constantly. In the corner of the bedroom, dampness spread like a bruise, drops trickling down the wall and leaving dirty streaks. I ran into the hallway, up the stairs, and pounded on my upstairs neighbor's door. For long seconds, nothing. Then footsteps. The door creaked open, and there he was, half asleep, in a stretched-out t-shirt and boxers. I shouted. "My whole apartment is flooding. Water is pouring from the ceiling. It's coming from you." He blinked at me with dull eyes, yawned, and calmly said, "My place is dry. Not my problem." I couldn't believe my ears. I wanted to drag him down to see it with his own eyes, but he just shrugged and slammed the door. Back inside, I nearly slipped. The water had already spread into the hallway. Pots and bowls had overflowed, the kitchen looked like a shallow lake. Drops hammered the table, spilling onto my laptop. I lunged for it and barely saved it, but the keyboard was already wet. On the shelf near the window, my books had swollen and warped, their pages stuck together as if they'd been dunked in a bucket. The smell of dampness grew heavier, the air thicker, like a basement that had been locked for years. I ran from room to room like a trapped animal, emptying bowls into the sink, swapping in new ones. Every 5 minutes it felt like the flow got stronger. I rushed back upstairs, pounding on his door with my fists. "Do you understand everything's flooding? My furniture, my electronics, everything's ruined." His muffled voice came through the door, flat and annoyed. "I told you, it's not me. Figure it out yourself." Rage boiled in me. I wanted to break down his door, but I didn't have the strength. I had been hauling water back and forth for half an hour already, my legs slipping, my clothes soaked through. In desperation, I grabbed my phone and started filming. A close-up of the drops falling onto my pillow. A bucket half full after just minutes. My books, warped and ruined. I spoke out loud to the camera, "It's 3 a.m., water is pouring from the ceiling. The neighbor refuses to admit it. My things are destroyed." Panic rose in me with every new sound of dripping. It wasn't just water anymore, it was like each drop hammered against my skull. I didn't know what to save first, what to grab, what to protect. That night I never closed my eyes. I sat on the floor, rotating pots and bowls, carrying water to the bathtub, filming new evidence. The apartment's chills soaked into me, bone deep, as if the flood was inside me too. I felt like I was drowning, even though the water barely reached my ankles. And through it all, one thought kept pounding in my head: who's going to pay for this? And why am I the one left suffering alone? Morning greeted me with the stench of dampness and the squish of water under my feet. I sat on a chair in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by pots and pans that overflowed again and again. The whole night had been a marathon: fill, empty, swap, replace. And still, the apartment kept drowning. I stared at the ceiling, feeling helplessness rising inside me. The wallpaper had bubbled, plaster crumbled down, and dirty streaks ran along the walls. My books were ruined for good, swollen, heavy, sagging like dead weight. I picked one up, and the pages clung together, tearing apart in my hands. I climbed upstairs again and banged harder than the night before, fists aching. This time the neighbor opened dressed, but with the same angry, tired look. "Have you seen what's happening in my apartment?" I asked, struggling to stay calm. "I already told you, it's not me," he snapped. My place is dry. So it's not my problem. But the water is pouring right under your bathroom. I almost shouted. Prove it, he smirked, and slammed the door. Those two words, prove it, stabbed into me like a knife. He knew I was right, but he was counting on me to give up. I called the landlord. He didn't answer at first, then finally picked up. I explained everything. He listened silently, then said flatly. That's not my problem. Work it out with your neighbor. But it's your property. I shouted in desperation. Your pipes, your responsibility. I rent the unit as is. The lease is clear, tenants cover minor damages. That's it, I don't have time. Click. Silence. Something cracked inside me. The neighbor brushed me off, the landlord hid behind paperwork, and I stood ankle-deep in water in my own home. I opened my laptop, miraculously saved from drowning, and started searching. What to do when a neighbor floods your apartment? Who is liable for water damage? Small claims court water disputes. I devoured article after article, taking notes, photos, videos, inspection reports. By noon, I called in a repairman to check. He walked through the rooms, looked at the ceiling, and said matter-of-factly. Leaks definitely from upstairs. No question. I asked him to write it down, and he scribbled on a form, "'Cause of flooding, damaged plumbing in upstairs apartment." Holding that slip of paper gave me a flicker of confidence, but it didn't last. I looked around, the TV no longer turned on, the couch reeked like swamp water, the fabric heavy and damp. In the kitchen, water dripped near an outlet. I was afraid to flip the switch. I picked up my phone again and filmed everything. Here, I narrated, pointing the lens at the stained ceiling. The water keeps coming. Here's the paperwork. Here's the technician's note. This isn't imagination. This is reality. I wasn't just speaking to the camera, I was speaking to myself, proving I wasn't losing my mind. That evening I tried once more with the neighbor. He cracked the door, tried to shut it immediately. Wait. I blocked it with my foot. Do you understand I'll have to demand compensation? Compensation? He sneered. You'll get nothing. You'll never get anything. And the door slammed in my face. I stood there on the landing, breathing hard. His words felt like a challenge. You'll never get anything. No one had ever tried. No one had taken it this far. Back downstairs, I laid everything out on the table, photos, videos, the note, call logs. The thought flickered, maybe he's right. Maybe I really won't get anywhere. But then I looked at the soaked walls, smelled the mildew, and realized, I had no choice. I had to fight. The night before court I hardly slept. I kept going over my evidence, the videos of water streaming from the ceiling, the photos of swollen furniture, the technician's report. I was terrified the judge would say, not enough proof. At the same time, anger burned inside me. I wasn't the one at fault, yet I was the one living in mold, losing my things, wasting my nerves. In the morning I buttoned a clean shirt, slid the documents into a folder, and headed out. The air was sharp and cold, but it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in weeks. At the courthouse clerk's window, I handed over my paperwork. The clerk leafed through my photos, text message printouts, and the technician's note, then stamped the complaint. Case accepted, he said flatly. Summons will be sent. Preliminary hearing in 10 days. Make sure the defendant receives service. Walking out with that case number in my hand, I felt both relief and dread. I had taken the first step, but the hard part was still ahead. That evening I mailed the summons to my upstairs neighbor by certified post, copied the landlord, and sat in my damp apartment tallying losses, the ruined carpet, the warped dresser, the books that had turned to pulp, the keyboard that no longer typed half its letters. At the preliminary hearing, the judge listened carefully. My neighbor stuck to his line. My place was dry. It's the building's pipes, not my fault. The landlord hid behind paperwork. The lease specifies tenant responsibility. Not on me. The judge frowned and tapped his pen. Since the source is disputed, I'm ordering an inspection. A court-appointed inspector will examine both units. The owner must provide access. We'll reconvene next week. No instant victory, just facts to be established. The inspector arrived midweek with a hard notebook, a moisture meter, and a flashlight. He moved silently, pressing the device to the walls. It beeped and lit red, as if the building itself was confessing. In my bedroom corner the meter wailed. He photographed the stains, checked the wardrobe where the wood had blackened. Upstairs, the neighbor opened the door reluctantly. The inspector crawled under the sink, checked the flexible water line, ran his finger across. It came back chalky with dried salts. The washing machine hose looked old, the rubber cracked. Around the joint were white streaks of past leaks. He snapped close-up photos, jotted notes, and finally said, "See this? Signs of long-term microleaks. When pressure spikes, it can burst. Source is likely here." 2 days later I received the report, diagrams, photos, moisture readings, conclusion, probable source, water supply line to appliance in upstairs unit, damages below consistent with flow path. At the next hearing the judge studied the report for a long time, matching photo numbers with dates. My knees trembled in rhythm with the ticking clock on the wall. The neighbor tried to sound confident. "It's an old building. Pipes fail all the time. Who knows what those gadgets really show?" The landlord added dryly, "I allowed access. Maintenance schedule is regular. The building is not at fault," the judge said finally, removing his glasses. The inspector points to a specific hose and traces the damage down to the plaintiff's unit. He turned to me. "Present your confirmed expenses." I handed over receipts: carpet, furniture repair, drying service, book appraisal, the ruined keyboard, cleaning. Total, $3,250, I said. The courtroom went silent. The judge made notes, then delivered the decision slowly, clearly. The court orders the defendant to pay $3,250 in damages and court costs. The property owner must replace the faulty hose within 14 days and arrange inspection of all similar connections in the line with building management. The neighbor dropped his gaze, his smirk gone. The landlord gave a curt nod, finally realizing that saving money on responsibility would cost more in the end. The clerk printed the decision. The crisp snap of paper in my hand sounded louder than any gavel. Outside, the wind was sharp, but it felt honest. I walked down the courthouse steps with the folder under my arm. Not triumph, not joy, order. Slow, heavy, real, complaint, inspection, report, ruling. Now it's your turn. Have you ever faced a flood and heard, "Not my problem"? What worked for you, negotiation, insurance, or court? Share in the comments. I'll feature the best stories in another video, so the next person woken at 3 a.m. by dripping water has a guide.